Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our special live video here tonight. It was a big day for the Raiders in free agency, and so we wanted to climb on with you and join you. I'm Scott Gulbransen with Silver and Black today. We appreciate you being here. Also, excuse me, I'm choked up. No, we're also joined by Hayden Nadolny, who I will bring here in just a second. He's joining us all the way from Australia. Of course, you remember Hayden. Hayden was a contributor and will be still every once in a while as his schedule allows on Silver and Black today. He's down in Australia. Longtime Raider fan, knows the team, knows football really, really well, and I mean American football. He also knows Australian rules football really good, too, and we're going to bring him in a second here. I'm going to connect through the magic of all this technology, which is just super duper. We're going to bring him in and talk with him and find out what he thinks about today. Obviously, huge day for the Raiders when you look at what they were able to do to improve over the last 2 days, actually. Their linebacking core, their defense, also signed Jason Witten, which was a surprise, I think, to most people today, but nonetheless, a great addition to that offense, great leadership. And so now we bring in Mr. Hayden Nadolny. How you doing, Hayden? If we can get your audio on here. Always. Oh, there we go. Let's see. We'll get you. We'll get you. Hang on, everybody. Technology. Hayden, you there? Let's see if are you on mute on your end, buddy? No. We will get it here. Here we go. Okay, let's go. Now, through the magic of the interwebs, Hayden Nadolny. How you doing, buddy?
Very well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, of course. And so, first of all, let's get your take right off the bat with what you think of this this day today with what the Raiders did. I mean, clearly the big name, Jason Witten's a big name, but as far as the Raiders and their future and what they're able to do with the defense, Cory Littleton was the big prize today. Talk about what he means. I mean, for this linebacking core, it's been just terrible for the Raiders over the last several years. They tried a lot of vets, plug-and-play vets, that didn't work out. Not that some of those players weren't good guys or good locker room guys, but they just didn't get it done on the field. What do you think of Cory Littleton and that signing? Not only that, Hayden, but what about the price tag?
Well, the price tag was actually cheaper than what I expected. I thought he was going to get anywhere from 14 to 15 million per year, and it's clearly the Vegas state tax has really helped get them to like 12 million per year. And he's never missed a game due to injury. He's only 26 years old, so he's got plenty of years left in him. And he's easily the best linebacker that the Raiders are going to have in, dare I say, since Kurt Morrison and Thomas Howard back in the late 2000s. No,
I agree 100% with that. And you look at that and him coming in, and then Nick Kwiatkoski yesterday, Kwiatkoski, excuse me. I could get used to saying that name, right? Those guys coming in, and then, of course, you saw today Maliek Collins added on the defensive front inside there. And you look at this defense, Hayden, and overall light years ahead of where the season ended and where they were. You add those players to that young core of Clelin Ferrell, and then, of course, Max Crosby on the other side, Maurice Hurst. P.J. Hall might be the outside guy looking in now, but this defense looks so much different. You feel a lot better going into this season, even before they're done.
Oh, you have to. They've got a few pieces that still need filling, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of holes that have been shorn up by Mayock and Gruden. And I think anyone that knows half of what's going on with Raider Nation the past few years is that the defense just has not been good enough. And they're well on their way to improving that. So Paul Guenther has no excuses.
No, and I wonder, though, Hayden, I think this is kind of the elephant in the room. Paul Guenther, obviously a good friend of John Gruden, but when it comes to business, sometimes friendship takes a back seat to that. And you look at Rod Marinelli coming in, and then you look at what they did today. You have 3 Cowboys coming over, 1 on offense, 2 on defense thus far. And you kind of have to wonder there, the writing is a little bit on the wall, and clearly Marinelli probably had a lot of influence on getting those guys over from the Cowboys, especially when you're looking at Maliek Collins, who was one of those guys that he really worked with closely.
Certainly, Maliek Collins would have definitely been Marinelli all over, but I also don't think you can count out Rich Bisaccia in terms of bringing over
Good point.
Jeff Heath from the safety, because even though he started quite a few games over the course of his career. Heath is still an elite special teamer, and we all know that Rich Bisaccia loves his guys, and Rich was over in Dallas for a number of years. So that's certainly one guy that I'm sure that they're happy to have going forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And Hayden, I mean, you look at what they've been able to do going back to yesterday. Of course, they signed the linebacker Nick Kwiatkoski. Gosh, I got to get that right, guys. I will get it right.
It's not easy.
No, and I'm reading it versus knowing how to pronounce it, which I did yesterday. I spent time doing that. But you look at Kwiatkoski, you look at Marcus Mariota, and we'll get to that separately because obviously that's a hot button issue with the conversation that's been occurring with Derek Carr. And, of course, breaking news earlier today, Tom Brady's going to be a Buccaneer, which is strange and weird to say at the same time. But clearly what they've been able to do over the first 2 days of free agency, I think a lot of Raiders fans were a little dismayed because they were expecting this big splash like last year when they went out and got Trent Brown within 10 minutes of that legal tamper period opening. This year, you signed the linebacker that most Raiders fans didn't really have a lot of familiarity with. Of course, if they read Mo Moton's piece on our website, they would have known who he was. But nonetheless, they weren't familiar with that. Then Marcus Mariota got some people excited, but still not the big name and the kind of player that you're thinking is going to help your team get there. But then today, boom, it hits. And I don't think they're done. I think obviously you have to get another cornerback. There's not a lot of guys out there, Hayden, but who are you thinking that maybe they take a look at? I mean, Chris Harris is a guy, I'm not real high on him, but what else? I know you have a trade idea for them when it comes to the cornerback position.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about Darius Slay wanting a new contract, and he's a corner in Detroit, and he's been a very good corner for a long time. He had a down year last year, and 29 years old. Still got a few years left in the tank, and I could certainly see the Raiders trying to acquire Slay, who would instantly be a number one corner, for, dare I say, maybe with one of those 3 of the third-round picks that they've got. So he's going to have a new contract, so they're going to have to pay for that as well. But, I mean, for a third or, dare I say, a fourth-round pick, and you can get a number one corner, probably do it.
Yeah, that absolutely true. And I think that's what they're either going to do it through trade. I don't see. I mean, do they sign Harris? I think he's on the downside of his career. I mean, last year was not good for him in Denver. Amazing talent, don't get me wrong. And maybe there is some left in the tank there, but I think the Raiders have had not the best of luck recently with getting guys like that. There's been a couple examples to the contrary of that, but it'll be interesting. And clearly the draft this year is not deep in that position. So it still is the one area after they lost out on Byron Jones, which we understand clearly they were deep and pursued him heavily, but the price there was just too costly. But if you look at these deals, Hayden, if you look at the money situation here, the Raiders still in a good spot. They spent a lot of money today, but for what they got, the value to me was well worth it.
Without a doubt, they haven't overspent ridiculously on too many people. I think the Carl Nassib signing, even though they've paid a ridiculous amount of money up front, they're probably going to get 1 or 2 good years out of him. He's still only 26 years old.
Yes.
So, and he has shown that, dare I say, he's probably an upgrade on Josh Morrow, who in all likelihood will not be on the team next year. He's going to be a really good edge setter. He's going to be able to kick inside and be part of that 3-tech rotation in the pass rush. But look, apart from that signing, I think the Kwiatkoski signing, that's really good value, $7 million per year. You compare to what other linebackers were getting, like Blake Martinez, who really, to me, he's only a 2-down linebacker. He can't cover. He was getting $10 million per year in New York. And then you look even last year, the absurd contract that Mosley got with the Jets. That was a ridiculous deal.
Yeah.
So you look at that Kwiatkoski signing, that's real value. He's going to come in. He's going to get the green dot from day one. And he was only a little bit more than what they were paying Tahir Whitehead to do a whole lot of not much. So then you've got Cory Littleton, who at $12 million is an absolute steal. He's one of the premier linebackers in the NFL. And the Raiders have got him, and he's going to be a 3-down guy. The Raiders finally have a guy who is going to be able to match up on a tight end. He's also going to be able to match up on a running back coming out of the backfield. So just having a piece like that in the AFC West is so key when you've got guys like Travis Kelce, Hunter Henry, Noah Fant. It's imperative that the Raiders be able to cover the tight end, and then you've got some great backs coming out of the backfield in the West as well. So getting Littleton and Kwiatkoski on my two, they've turned the biggest weakness on the team into a strength, and that's really all you can ask for at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that, Hayden. And if you look at some of the other signings, of course, Cory Littleton, here's a guy that, again, 26 years old, 3 years, $36 million. And you tweeted this out early, right after the kind of terms of the deal came out, that was a great bargain. And I agree with you on that. And if you look at him, particularly the fact of how he plays in coverage, to me, this is a guy, I know most of Raider fans were excited about him and the possibility of the Raiders going out and getting him. But this is a guy who's going to come in, have instant impact. But I don't think they're done at linebacker. I think they still will. And I know some people disagree after what happened today and yesterday. I still think they'll go out and get a young linebacker in the draft as well.
Oh, I think you have to. They've only covered two of the three spots. You could say Marco Lee is the strong side guy, but they've got Littleton and Kwiatkoski as the three down backers that are necessary. But you still need quality depth behind them. And Mayock said one of the big issues as the team went down the stretch last year was they had no depth. So I'll be very, very surprised at the very least if they don't draft someone either early on day 3 or on day 2 with one of those third-round picks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let's talk about the big surprise today, right? Which was Jason Witten. When you look at Jason Witten, a lot of people say, oh, well, why would you pay that money for a guy who's going to be the fourth tight end? I don't think he will be. I think you look at Foster Moreau, Hayden, and you look at the fact he's coming off knee surgery, and you're a chiropractor. You know all about this stuff. That's not always an automatic, hey, when training camp gets here and the season gets here, I'm ready to go. Sometimes it can linger. Sometimes it takes time to get into playing shape. So that's one piece of it, is you get a guy to come in, even at his age, he's still very strong, especially in the red zone. And guess who needs help in the red zone? So I think bringing Jason Witten in for leadership in that tight end room, which obviously is without question, but also to have him there for the rest of that young offense was a stroke of brilliance in my view.
It's certainly going to play its value more off the field than on the field. I don't think he's going to see many snaps because I really do see Waller and Moreau as the two top guys. Like you said, Moreau is coming off knee surgery. He's meant to be ready for training camp. That being said, he did his ACL, which is the anterior cruciate ligament, and that can be up to a 12-month recovery in some instances. Often with the latest rehab going on, it's usually anywhere between 8 and 10 months, give or take. So there is a good chance that Moreau is ready for training camp and ready to go. But even then, like you said, he still has to get back into that playing shape, and there's a possibility he won't be ready to go right away. And Witten's, that he's a pro. He's going to be able to digest the offense really quick, and he offers more versatility. I mean, right now the Raiders need a multitude of different types of players to be able to improve their creativity on offense. And that's not only in terms of explosiveness on the outside, it's also in terms of what you can do from a formation perspective. And having 3 capable tight ends, specifically Witten, Moreau, and Waller, it enables them to spread them out. You can put Waller out on the flank, you can put him in the slot, you can even put Witten in the slot, but you can create a number of different formations, a number of different shifts, and get the defense into a desired look that enables Carr and the offense to really take advantage of whatever the defense gives them.
Well, and Hayden, we're going to go to, we have a great chat going on here on our Facebook page. A lot of folks watching tonight, and some questions for you and for us, and some general statements I want to address. Fabian Ramirez, thanks for watching, Fabian. Mariota's probably the best backup since Plunkett. It's a good point. At one time, remember Rich Gannon was a backup. Even with the Raiders for a short period of time. So we'll see on that one. But I also wanted to ask this question of you, Hayden, and that was, let me find it here. Here it is. They wanted to know a grade from you, if you would, Cory, our good viewer and longtime listener on the radio show and podcast, Cory Sanford, would like to know what you would give the Raiders thus far as a letter grade goes when it comes to the free agent acquisitions.
It's incomplete at this stage. If you had a gun to my head and I had to give you a letter, it'd probably be a B to a B minus. I mean, they missed out on the top corner in Byron Jones. But the reality is they were still able to fill a number of holes, and they're not only filling them with like bargain basement guys, they're filling them with really solid players, and they're going to be able to be real contributors for this team going forward. And the biggest thing for me that I've taken from free agency is not only they've gone and made their biggest weakness one of their biggest strengths, but they've enabled to have so much versatility now when it comes to the draft, because outside of corner and maybe safety, how many real positions on defense need to be urgently filled right now? There aren't too many. And on offense, outside of a true number one receiver, maybe a second running back to go with Josh Jacobs and Jalen Richard, there's not a whole lot left. So the Raiders really can go with that best player available sort of vibe when it comes to the draft next month.
Yeah, that's what struck me about the moves today, Hayden, was the fact that they've addressed so many of those needs with those free agents. And I think Mike Mayock and John Gruden continue to do a good job working together to find those guys to fit into the puzzle. And so that draft, you're right. Now the draft becomes, and I don't think they're done. Like you said, I think there's still going to be a defensive back there. There might even be some other guys for depth in other positions in free agency as we move along this week and get into the actual start of the new year tomorrow. But I look at this and I think, wow, this gives you a lot of flexibility in the draft to do different things and to maybe look at securing positions and really building that depth that you need, bring in some young guys to play behind some veterans or to supplement other areas, wide receiver being obviously one of them, the Lamb, Judy, Ruggs, whoever your favorite guy is. They're now in a position where I think, they can do that. Yes, get a young linebacker. I still think you should in the first round because it doesn't hurt and it always helps. But to me, being able to have that flexibility will be huge for them when they go into the April draft, which of course was canceled here in Las Vegas, so we don't get to see it in person. But nonetheless, it's going on. And you agree with that they now have that flexibility to do many, many more things?
Oh, without a doubt. There's not many like glaring, ridiculous holes left on the roster. I mean, you've got the number one receiver issue, and that's going to be smack bang in your face until it turns blue, really, until you fill it. But realistically, they got picked 12. Go and get your number one receiver there. You are most likely going to have at least two of the top three receivers available to pick from. That's the obvious three. Henry Ruggs, the third. You've got CeeDee Lamb. You've got Jerry Jeudy. You're going to have at least two of those on the board by the time the Raiders are on the clock at 12. And you pick one, and you're going to have a number one receiver then and there who can spread the field and really help you. And then when it comes to the defense, like I said, there's really outside of really rotational guys to help out now, especially on the D line. They need a true playmaker in the back on the back end there. So I'd like either a ball hawking safety to push Heath down to a third safety. You've got Abram also on the back end there, but I really would like to see them get a number one corner. Now, if that's possible in the draft, I really don't think so because the corner class really isn't that good this year.
Not at all.
But you've got Darius Slay. I'm not a fan of Chris Harris. I don't think he's a schematic fit, given that he spends a lot of time in the slot. And if they intend on playing LaMarcus Joyner there, sort of you're doubling up at the one position. It's not really going to work. So I'm not convinced he's the guy. But look, they've got flexibility right now, and they've got a lot more flexibility now than they did, dare say, 36 hours ago. So they're trending in the right direction.
No, I agree with that. And of course, the other signing, we look at the offense, Jason Witten, we already talked about him, but you look at Marcus Mariota. And I think with Mariota, to me, I had been calling for a while, said, listen, bring somebody in to push Derek Carr. Bring somebody in to compete for that job, if you will. Now, if it's a truly open competition, I don't think that'll ever be said. But I do think that having someone there to push him, because he hasn't had anybody really there to push him in a while. And I think if you're a competitive guy, and I think Derek Carr is, if you're a competitive guy, you want that. You want somebody to get the best out of you. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So to me, bringing Mariota in was a good move. They're very similar players in many ways, I think, especially from a personality standpoint. Of course, Mariota has better feet, but it also allows you, and you mentioned this yesterday, allows you perhaps to do things in certain situations with Mariota in there to supplement Derek Carr versus replace him.
Yeah, I think that they can use Mariota in packages similar to the way the New Orleans Saints use Taysom Hill. I mean, you've got Drew Brees there, but that hasn't stopped Sean Payton from taking Brees, splitting him out wide, putting Taysom Hill under center, and running up the gut for a few yards, or throwing out wide. It just opens up a completely different wrinkle. And let's face it, the Raiders were goddamn terrible in the red zone this year. You know,
yes.
They were horrific. They could not score to save themselves. So, look, really, if they can add a piece or two that's going to be able to help them there, and I think that's where Witten's going to help as well, it's going to mean that they can turn field goals into touchdowns. And
yes.
when the average game in the NFL, the difference is what? Usually about a touchdown score. So you're not really having to improve a whole lot. If you can improve that red zone and really improve that defense, the Raiders are gonna win a lot more games this year, and they're gonna be a really good team.
Well, and that's the thing I've always said, and it wasn't an overt criticism of Derek Carr. I'm not a Carr hater. I'm not a person who thinks Carr is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But what I will tell you is that the one thing that I was critical on Derek Carr is exactly what you mentioned, because I thought he bore a lot of the responsibility, and that was not being able to score in the red zone. And so to improve on that, to be able to get over that hump would make the biggest difference. I mean, not only that, the third quarter lack of scoring, which I think is not on Derek Carr. I think that's on coaching and adjustment, much of it. But he certainly has a part to play in that. To me, that's all going to fit in there. And again, Marcus Mariota being there is going to push him. And I think that, you know, one of the questions we're getting on YouTube is about Marcus Mariota's contract. Out of all the players the Raiders have signed, the only player that we haven't gotten any details, and some people are running with it as a conspiracy, of course, but we have not gotten any details on Mariota's contract. Don't you think that's odd?
It's only because the agent hasn't leaked it to the media.
Yeah, that's right.
The team never.
But why though? But why?
I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah,
it's going to get reported eventually.
Sure, it will be.
I'm not too concerned about that. I don't really think it's. I think people are looking for a little bit of a storm in a teacup.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that.
They're trying to make something out of not much.
But I personally asked the question earlier on Twitter because I just thought I tweet just things I'm thinking instead of actually thinking them out further and then making a salient point. I often just kind of stream of consciousness, and I did that earlier. By the way, some of the comments on YouTube, Hayden, I need your help. Frank, who's a frequent viewer of ours, says we both look like stockbrokers. Go figure. Next time, I'll try.
If I was a stockbroker right now, I would have a whole lot of less hair, having torn it all out this last week with the market turning to shit.
Yeah, well, I'm older. I'm older than you, so I'm already losing some of my hair. I would do it. But yeah, and Frank said he was kidding, but I get it. We also have David Atkerson is asking, how do you feel about Xavier Rhodes?
He's the corner from Minnesota. He's old and washed.
Yeah. No, I mean,
he's a signing that would have been made 5 years ago by Reggie when they were cap-stricken and had no one to sign, and they signed him out of desperation and anything.
Yeah, you got that.
Raiders. We're not the Desperados anymore.
You got the Reggie mention in, but no, that's absolutely true. And what else we have here? Also, question on Carr plays too many video games. Boy, I don't know what to say like that. The Raiders need depth. Yeah, I think that's the thing that we need to look at too, is that sometimes when you have some of these signings, people don't get real excited when you sign a depth guy But in the NFL, Hayden, you have to have depth. It's one of the reasons why the Raiders petered out at the end of last year, frankly, was maybe were playing a little above who they were, but also through attrition, they lost guys and they just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, look, they had a lot of injuries. Renfro getting injured really hurt them, I think, more than they realised at the time, because he really took off that second half of the year. Once he got inserted into the offense, he was a real spark for them. And Jacobs being injured, and they sort of had to manage the load, which meant that they, outside of Darren Waller, they didn't really have a whole heap of weapons on offense. That meant that schematically they couldn't really get too creative because they're trying to manage everything. So it was a real, a conundrum that they were damned if they do, damned if they don't. And then the problems were compounded because they had a defense that, they couldn't tackle anyone. They couldn't stop the pass to save themselves. So
right.
it was just a mess by the end of the season. But at the same time, you have to look at the first 10 games and realize, okay, there is something to this team. They've got a pretty good foundation. The guys that were key players then are still on the team now. And they've got a lot of promise going forward. And with the additions that they've made through free agency so far and the additions that they're going to be able to make through the draft, there is no reason whatsoever to think that the Raiders can't make the playoffs this season.
No, and I agree with that. I think, although we saw today with the signings that we saw, Tom Brady obviously going to the Buccaneers, that's going to be announced tomorrow, Phillip Rivers going to the Colts, you suddenly, and Drew Brees going back to New Orleans next year, I should say this year. I'm so used to.
How good is that going to be with Drew Brees and Tom Brady in the same division?
Yeah,
that is going to be awesome.
Right,
you got Matt Ryan as well. That division is going to be bonkers, man.
It's going to be crazy. Not only that, Hayden, but if you look at Allegiant Stadium here in Las Vegas, the new home of the Raiders. And I'll get to some construction news on that one because as most of you know, and you're all going through different things here in the United States, and I know you have some of the same things going on in Australia around the virus down there, Hayden, but they announced that they're basically shutting our state down for 30 days. All non-essential businesses closed. And what does that mean for the stadium? I'll get to that in a minute, so stay tuned. But when it comes to the schedule next year, you're going to have Phillip Rivers here. You're going to have Breeze here. You're going to have Tom Brady here. You might have Tua here if the Dolphins draft him. And then you have Patrick Mahomes, obviously, with the Chiefs. It's going to be the non-conference games coming into Allegiant Stadium. It's going to be tough to get a ticket with all those guys coming through here.
What it means is prime time.
Yes.
That's what it means. We're going to see Vegas in prime time this year on more than one occasion. We're going to be seeing the Death Star in all its glory, and it's going to be absolutely spectacular. I am so keen. For it. It's having a stadium. I'm from Adelaide in Australia, and we had a dilapidated stadium about 10 years ago for football, and it was just an absolute hole. And eventually what they did was they decided to redevelop another football stadium that was in the middle of downtown, and it has completely revitalized the city. It's given a lot of civic pride, and it became the crown jewel of football stadiums in the country. And all other stadiums now in Australia that are getting developed took the Adelaide Oval model in terms of the way that it goes about the design and the ingress and the egress of the people and the sight lines and all of that. And it's an absolute gem. And Vegas is now going to set the new standard for stadiums for football in America. And it's been so long since, the Raiders have never had a stadium that they've been able to take pride in. And now, not only to have a world-class stadium, it's going to be in one of the most iconic cities in the world, and they're going to be on prime time. They're going to have all the competitive advantages that every other NFL team has been afforded to, that the Raiders haven't necessarily had. And now that they have no disadvantage going forward, it's a real celebration, and people are really underestimating how much a new stadium, a new headquarters out at Henderson, how much that's really going to impact.
Yeah, and not only that, Hayden, I think fans, Raiders fans, they're obviously all excited.
You there, mate?
Yeah. You probably can't hear me. Okay, now you can hear me.
Yeah.
But the Raider fans are all very excited about the stadium. It's a beautiful stadium. We're doing drone videos over it to bring people kind of progress to show them where it's at here on the YouTube channel. By the way, make sure you subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. But I will tell you that I don't think they quite have grasped yet, and this is not in any way an insult or anything. I don't think they've grasped yet what you just said, which is the difference that it makes financially as a viable franchise and what that means to the long-term health of the franchise. And I think they're about to see that. They're about to see that over the next couple of years, and we've already seen it. And before I get back to the football question, just an update. I did have messages back and forth today with Tommy White from the Laborers Union here in town. Of course, those are the men and women building the stadium. And even though all the businesses are shut down, word from him is that work will go on the stadium. So if you start hearing rumors that construction workers aren't going to be there, that is not true. We have a lot of big projects happening in Las Vegas. And despite all these precautions, that's part of the economy that they're not going to stop. But we have to fill the stadium with workers to finish the stadium, of course, by July 31st. But then also the MSG Sphere, which is another huge project near the Strip, as well as Resorts World, big hotel project. Those will all continue to be built. So if any of you were wondering that, I think I saw a couple questions, but that is just the latest news, and that's coming right from Tommy White, who is a more than reliable source because his men and women are building it. So that is a good thing. Now, question from OC Nation. Should the Raiders keep 12 and trade down at 19 and pick up a second-round pick, wide receiver at 12, and in the second round maybe a defensive tackle at that, maybe if they can get something in the top to middle of the second round? What do you think, Hayden?
I'm certainly not opposed to it by any means. I mean, if you can potentially trade down to the early part of that second round and maybe grab a 2-day 2 picks or a second rounder and maybe a fourth, you probably do it, given the way that the depth is in this draft this year. But certainly not opposed to it. I don't think they're going to be trading up now. At the time, you looked at a guy like Isaiah Simmons, who was he was the one target they seriously would have considered trading up for. But now there aren't really any guys there, unless they do trade Derek Carr for a second round pick and then try to trade up and get their quarterback. But I really don't see that happening. So, in all likelihood, you probably will see a trade down from pick 19.
Yeah, and I think the actions as we've talked about throughout this stream, Hayden, I think what they've done in the last 2 days makes that more and more possible. I'm not going to say likely, but possible. And of course, now you're going to ignite the fire because you mentioned trading Derek Carr for a second round pick. But I do think that moving down would help them, especially if they get more draft capital, right? Because you can hit on this draft, especially and some of the key positions that they're looking at in the second and third round. When you get past third round, it gets a little more dicey. I know they got really lucky and they were really smart with Max Crosby last year, but not fourth, fifth, sixth round draft picks don't always work out. The odds continue to go down as you go down each round. So to me, yeah, I think that trading out of that number 19 spot, but again, it all depends. That's the thing with the draft, everybody. You never know what's going to happen ahead of you. A team that might be interested at the beginning of the draft in that number 19, something else happens, they get another offer, and suddenly 19 is not as appealing for whatever reason, or you're not going to get the right deal. So I think the Raiders, Hayden, for me, one of the most impressive things that I've seen from them has really been the fact that they stick to their plan. From what we can see, Mike Mayock and John Gruden together really are executing, and you can kind of see they're playing this game of chess, and they seem to be doing really well at it.
Look, they are. They're not panicking.
Yep.
You know, in a world where everyone's panicking right now, they're not panicking.
Good point.
That's half the battle right there. And then look, they're very intelligent people, and they've been able to put together a plan that it's not just a 1 or 2 year thing. This is they've looked at a 4 or 5 year period on how they want to go about it, because they have the luxury of being afforded that long-term security, so they can really build a team as they see fit, and they're doing all the right things. I haven't really, looked at any of the moves that they've made, especially in the last 12 months, and think, geez, what were you thinking? There is a clear method to all of the moves that they're making and the way that they're constructing the roster, and they're putting the team in a really good position to succeed going forward.
Right, and I think last year there were a couple moves that people really questioned, and I'm not even including Antonio Brown because I think everybody was, despite his downside before all of the incidents occurred, everybody kind of was excited about that because he was one of, if not the best receiver in the NFL. So you could see it. There was the Richie Incognito, which worked out really, really well for them as well. And then going back to John Gruden's first year, of course, Mike Mayock wasn't there. But when you had the selection of Colton Miller so high, and of course, last year, Clone Furl in the draft, some of those things, and I still think Furl's going to be a fine player. People who gave up on him after 4 or 5 games, to me, aren't watching the same thing I'm not. Get NFL season pass, by the way, so you can watch breakdowns of plays. It actually helps, and you can ISO on guys and see what they're actually doing because they don't show it on TV all the time. But to me, Hayden, they are locked in. They are on the same page. And this talk that we heard when Mike Mayock first got hired, that he was a figurehead, I don't think so. I think this is a symbiotic relationship. It's a yin, it's a yang. They both have strengths and weaknesses and play off those and work together to make up for them. And I really do like what they're constructing there. They got to get it done on the field. So far, that's where they got to look at that. And they have pieces still to put in there. But where they're at in the draft, where they're at in free agency, if I'm a Raiders fan right now, I'm feeling pretty good about things. I wouldn't get too excited. Raider fans tend to get way too excited and way too low. And I understand why. But to me, you should be cautiously optimistic. And I agree with you. I think that this team can be a playoff team this year if everything clicks the way it should.
Yeah, well, they've had plenty of time to build it now.
Yep.
This is the third off season under John Gruden. It's the second off season under Mayo. They're keeping the quarterback most likely for the third straight year. The offense and defensive schemes are staying together for the third straight year, and the majority of the coaches are the same. So, if this is the desired team that they've assembled off the field, and now they've more or less, they're putting together a team that they're pretty happy with on the field. And they were 7-9 last year. Let's not act like this was a 3-13 team that needed a complete teardown. Sure, the season didn't end good, but they had a litany of injuries. Okay, so let's remember this team was 7-9, and to me, they weren't far away from being 8-8 and 9-7. I really don't think there was much separating. That they were in that tier of teams. Now, whether they can make the jump is a big step, but it's very clear as to what their deficiencies were going into this season. This upcoming season, they needed linebacker help. What have they done? They've gone and gotten two guys that are going to be 3-down linebackers, including, in my opinion, a top 3 cover linebacker in the league in Cory Littleton. Now, they still need a number 1 receiver. They still need a backup running back to complement Josh Jacobs, and they need a number 1 receiver. Of course, outside of that, you need depth across the board, but they have a team now, if you fill those holes, that are going to be able to really attack the playoffs. And I will be very disappointed at the very least if the Raiders don't give it a really good shake for a wild card spot this year.
Yeah, and the schedule does benefit them. I mean, I just mentioned all those quarterbacks they're going to be facing, but the reality is, compared to last year and previous years, they actually have a more favorable schedule. They'll have their new home, and like you said, they'll be in big games on national TV, and they might even be on the game the opener if the LA Stadium doesn't get the opener on Thursday night. It will very, very well may be here because of the draft being canceled here. I kind of starting to think a little bit like, okay, now you took the draft away from us, not because it's the NFL's fault, just because of all this virus stuff. So because of that, maybe they're going to try to make it up for the Las Vegas area and give us that first game here, which would be huge. But they're going to play in big games. We look at some of the other questions here, Hayden. Vontaze Burfict, a lot of people asking questions about him. Of course, he was reinstated and technically, I believe, is now a free agent. You see any reason why they bring him back?
36 hours ago, I would have said I thought he was going to come back, but not anymore. Not now that they've signed Kwiatkoski and Littleton. it doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore, even though they absolutely love Vontaze as a person. And he was a good player on the field. Let's not act like he was like a terrible player, but he's one hit away from being out, and they don't really have a spot for him on the team anymore. So I think that ship has sailed, but look, you never know. Things could pop up, and we've said that ships have sailed before, and then they turn around, and they re-enter the port. So anything's possible in the world of John Gruden.
Yeah, and Hayden, what about running backs? So of course Josh Jacobs, the starter, amazing rookie season, should have been the offensive rookie of the year in my view. As much as
no doubt.
Yeah, as much as I like Kyler Murray and think he's a good player too, I don't think there was any comparison really, especially impact on team. But when you look at that running back position, Alec Ingold. By the way, I'll announce it right now. Alec Ingold is going to be our guest on the Silver and Black today, Sunday at 10 a.m. here in the Pacific time zone. So make sure you join us for a live interview with Alec Ingold. But so you have Ingold at fullback, you have Josh Jacobs. You still need another running back. Is there anybody out there on the waiver wire right now or free agent, and this is a question we're getting a lot on YouTube, that you like that maybe the Raiders make a run at?
Devontae Freeman.
Yeah, that's
100% without even having a question. Devontae Freeman, he fits the scheme.
He does.
He can be a really good weapon to pair with Josh Jacobs. They're going to be able to dial some special things up with those two guys on the field. That's something that I would love to see happen, because Gruden absolutely loves to pound the rock and really establish the run, and you need two quality running backs to do that. And I know it's counterintuitive in today's game, in which is so focused on the spread offense, but really when you run the ball as much as the Raiders do, and you want to establish the run with really power formations and really go in 13 personnel and jam it up the middle on 3rd and 1. They know it's coming and you can still execute. You need a litany of running backs. You need to invest in that position.
Yes.
And that's the counterintuitivity of it all. But Devontae Freeman fits. He fits perfectly.
Well, and I think injury too. I mean, you have guys or times when you just want to. Josh Jacobs is a special athlete. He's a special kid, and you want him to be around for a long time. So if you can, especially in games where you might have a lead or can spell him, you want to be able to spell him, but you don't want to give up too much. You want to have a guy in there who can run. Freeman certainly meets that criteria. Looking at some of the other questions here about the draft, Fabian's asking, will the NFL draft come back for 2021? Fabian, I'm hoping. The NFL didn't say that it would be next year, but I hope they don't move down the line and give it to us. I say us for Las Vegas. That they don't give it to us 3 years from now. I hope that they just move everybody a year later. That, to me, would be the fair thing to do. So I hope that they do that as well. Michael asks, what do we do when we make the playoffs and Josh Jacobs has 300 carries? J.K. Dobbins or Hilaire at number 19?
Look, if Josh Jacobs has had 300 carries and you got the playoffs,
yeah,
you can throw another 25 carries per game for Josh Jacobs when it comes to the playoffs, because he's going to have a whole 8 months to get over it.
Yep.
And with the less amount of padded practices, and there's no 2 days anymore, and they've got exponential amount of days off now in the new CBA, he can handle having an extra few carries on his body early on. It's really about managing him during the season. That being said, even at 300, I am not concerned. The magic number that you need to avoid is probably 350 and above. We've seen guys like the running back from Dallas, I forget his name, Murray.
Yeah.
Do you remember his first name? I forget his name.
I don't.
Yeah, he had about 400 carries about 5-6 years ago, and that didn't work out. We've seen Larry Johnson when he was in Kansas City, and he ran for something like 420 carries or something.
Right.
He flamed out really quick. So there's a threshold that you can't exceed. But Jacobs has had so little carries in his college career. He's really only just scratching the surface of what he can do as a pro. So I have no doubt that he can handle the load.
Yeah, I think that's what people forget is that Alabama, he was not the featured back. So he actually came into the NFL very, very fresh. and of course had his time last year and had his injuries, played through that horrific injury, which I think most regular human beings would not be able to do. But he did, and so to me, I agree with you there. Corey asks, "What's the best free agent signing for that everyone likes so far?" He's asking this in the chat. For him, it was Kwiatkoski. For me, I can't look past Littleton because to me, he's the difference maker on that defense. He's the name. He's the talent. He is the superstar at linebacker that you have not had.
Yeah, no, Littleton's the guy for me. He's a top 3 linebacker in the league. He's where the league is trending in terms of that hybrid linebacker who can almost be an extra DB on the field, but still tough enough to get in there on the run, and he can cover matchup in terms of the tight end and the running back, and he's perfect fit for what we need.
Yeah, and thank you to DeVell who reminds us in my advancing years, DeMarco Murray.
That's the one. So, yes.
We got it. That's what I love about our viewers and listeners is they're always going to keep me honest, and they're always going to give me the answers. There's I always like to be the dumbest guy in the room. I want you guys to be smarter than I am. So I appreciate that very much. But still can't believe Scott's saying the Raiders will make the playoffs in the same sense. Corey, what are you talking about, man? I said last year they could make the playoffs. They had an outside chance. I'm a realist, okay? I mean, hey, but Hayden, you look at this last year. The reason I didn't think the Raiders would make the playoffs, and by the way, Corey, they did not make the playoffs. In case you didn't know, but the reason I didn't think they'd make the playoffs was because of that schedule. That was the only reason. Had they not had that schedule, and of course they had all the injuries at the end of the year, we talked about ad nauseum here. But to me, this year, with the moves that they've made, with all of the things falling into place, they're not going to win the division. I don't think. Clearly, with the Chiefs, I don't think they're there yet. But I do think that they will put themselves squarely in the wild card race for real. Last year, it was a little bit of pretend. They got there for a little while, and then they fell off. I think this year, Hayden, if they're not in the real, thick of the wild card race, it would be severely disappointing.
Oh, incredibly. But what we need to remember is that Raiders were 6-4 going into Arrowhead Stadium, where the Chiefs were also 6-4.
Yep.
Okay, so they were through 10 games of the season. The Raiders and the Chiefs had the same record. They were right there. They're right there. The Raiders had 5 away games in a row, 5 games on the road in a row, and they were still at 6-4 after that 10 games going into Arrowhead, which was the same as the Chiefs. Now, sure, Mahomes went down for a few games, but what I'm trying to say is that the team, they could have easily gone on a run there. That it was very, they were so close.
Yeah.
We're not acting like this is a 3-13 or 4-12 team. They were right there, and they let it slip from them because of a myriad of issues that happened. Now, okay, you could call them excuses, call them what you want. They happened. It is what it is. But now they're looking at rectifying that. And the biggest thing is that the key players that they had last year, they are bringing over into this season. They're still young. They're still improving. The chemistry is going to improve. My biggest concern going into this upcoming season isn't so much the personnel. It's going to be how are they going to be able to assimilate and move to Vegas given the virus outbreak, because it's going to mean that they're going to have less time together. It's going to mean that they're going to have less time to acclimate in a new city. And I hope that the novelty of all of that wears off come the start of the season.
Yeah.
I don't want that affecting them.
Yeah, and it's hard to say as we sit here today in the midst of this crisis and understand what may happen in the next few weeks. I tend to be an optimist. Of course, I'm reading all the stuff and watching all the stuff you guys are. I try only to watch it for a little bit every day, because if you watch it too much, it's just going to get you way too down. But, the worst case scenario, best case scenario, I said actually after all the sports started getting canceled, I asked the question, could the next sporting event, at least in the United States here, could the next live sporting events that we see be the NFL? And I think that may be. Now, Major League Baseball here has delayed and probably won't come back to maybe the earliest June or even July. And then what kind of season do you have there? So we might be looking at that, but I think you're right. I think that the whole world is coming to a standstill as we fight this thing, and we don't know what the impact will be on that team coming here. The good news there is that everyone else is going through it. Now, everyone else is not moving to a new city, into a new office building, into a new headquarters, and moving their households and all of that. That's the big wrinkle, Hayden, and it's a good point that you bring that up, because that could play a part. There's no doubt about it. Raider Zach asks, I think we still make a play for Chris Harris or attempt a trade for Anthony Harris. Anthony Harris was tagged by the Vikings. Yeah, I don't know. I have no indication, Anthony, that they tagged him to trade him. I think they want to keep him. He is crazy good and often goes under the radar because of who he plays next to. But he was one of the guys I talked about last week, actually, Anthony Harris, and it's unfortunate that they tagged him, because I would have loved to see the Raiders make a run at him.
Yeah, Anthony Harris, apparently, according to Ian Rappaport, he's been made available for a trade.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So there you go. Anthony's on top of it.
There is a chance there, but
Raider Zach, I should say, is on top of that about Anthony.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So look, I'm pretty sure they were talking to Cleveland about a trade there, but I have no knowledge of the Raiders engaging the Vikings in a potential trade for Anthony Harris. That being said, they do need someone on the back end who's going to be a real playmaker. They need a number one corner. It's a shame that they didn't get Byron Jones. I think if they got Byron Jones, you could have said, okay, yeah, shut up shop. Let's go to the draft right now, because the team's ready to go. But realistically, they need to find a corner some way or another. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they need to. Otherwise, it's going to be a major issue going forward. Yeah, see how they go.
Well, and to me, Hayden, that's where they're going. That's the rub. The rub is they're going to have to go get a guy, and I don't see him on the street. I think it's going to have to be a trade. I don't think, like you said, even though if Harris is available, like you and Zach are telling me, I missed that one today. Then great, but clearly the cost there, it's going to be tough, and the Raiders don't seem to have the desire to go get him. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe they'll switch up on us and go grab him. But to me, you're going to have to address that one way or another. And so that might be something that comes closer to draft day in a trade that we don't see right now around the free agency period. So it'll be interesting. This team is not that far away. I thought they're so much closer on offense and defense, but after today, that was made different and that was brought up to speed, and I like where the team is going, and I don't see any big downsides. I really think that, you look at things now, you look at Derek Carr, he doesn't have his wide receiver yet. They will get that probably in the draft, and probably another veteran as well, like a Perryman or somebody like that, who's he's not going to be the number one, but somebody who can come in and bring some depth to that receiving core. But now you're going to put Derek Carr in a position to where you can't go back and say, hey, look, he didn't have the weapons, he didn't have that. That offense should be pretty complete. Hayden, do you agree on that?
Yeah, the whole key of this offseason is making sure that there are no excuses personnel-wise that can be used to expunge any poor quarterback play. So we want to make sure that the receiver group is, complete. The running back group is great right now. We know the O-line is going to be a strength. The tight end group is, in my opinion, it's the best pound for pound in the league. So there really shouldn't be an excuse on offense, provided Carr gets his number one receiver. Yep. And then you've got the defense that's going to be able to help the offense out in terms of making sure that they don't need to score 35 points a game in terms of a shootout. So realistically, Derek Carr, whoever's under center for that matter, really shouldn't have any excuses this season.
Yeah, and Corey asked, too, which free agent do you think landed in the best spot so far? Boy, I'm not going to give you one, Corey, but I will tell you that I'm impressed, again, with what the Ravens did when you look at Brockers as well there, and what they were able to do with that defense. And they're not far away. We saw that last year, obviously, with Lamar Jackson there and what they were able to do. But the trade and then the signing, or the trades with Brockers and all that, building that defense, to me, was one of the spots, or one of the teams, I should say, not a player per se, to do that. But there were some odd signings to me. I thought the Quinn signing in Chicago was a very good one for them. That's a guy I really advocated and wanted to see the Raiders go after, and they may have been in on a little bit, but instead went on the inside. and clearly they're pretty happy on the outside and may supplement it some more. But do you think, what do you think about that defensive front with the addition of Collins today and what they already have in place, Hayden?
They need one guy to tie it all together. They've got a lot of nice complementary guys and a good group, but they really need that elite number one guy to make everyone else around them better. It's akin to the receiver group. I mean, if you look at the receiver group that the Raiders have, they have a lot of nice number two guys without having that elite number one guy to put the pressure on. And the same thing is going on the defense. You never know, right? Max Crosby might take a gigantic second year leap, and he turns into that guy. And I expect Cleve Farrell to make a jump. And but I would like to see them invest in a really good either edge rusher or interior rusher. And there are some really good ones in the draft this year, especially at pick 12. If the Raiders don't want to go receiver at pick 12, there are a few nice interior defensive linemen who could potentially be there at 12 if they slide, which is a possibility in the draft.
No, definitely, and I like that too. Finding the help inside. I think Collins today was a great acquisition. I think he's a guy who was going to bolster that. He's not that big edge guy, obviously, because he's on the inside. But that big edge guy, if they can get him, and Furl can be that guy. I really do believe it. He's not going to be a high sack guy. He doesn't have to be. But if you can get him to play more consistently on the outside, they kept moving him around last year, which is, I think, why you saw him struggle towards the end of the year. He really came on, but I like what they're doing up front and the kind of philosophy they're taking. And we did get another question about if we thought Paul Guenther was on the hot seat. I don't know that you can say that he's not, because when you bring in a Marianelli with all his experience and what he was able to do in Dallas and his career, you look at that and you think to yourself, okay, Paul Guenther. But I think that's fair. I think Paul Guenther has had talent that hasn't worked out, and some of those players were players that he advocated, from what we understand. So Hayden, to me, it's a make or break for him probably this year. And they went out in the last 2 days and they got him the talent, so there really is no excuse.
No, there isn't any excuse. They got to win. Yeah, they got to win.
That's
simple.
Just win, baby.
Just win,
right?
baby.
That's what it's all about. Well, Hayden, man, I want to thank you for joining us all the way from Australia. And as we're all getting more and more confined to our homes, appreciate you spending the time. I know we had a lot of viewers on tonight and a lot of questions, and we'll do this more often, and we'll try to get you as your schedule equals out, and we can get you on more often. We'll do that because I love doing this, and I know folks love hearing from you and your knowledge of the great American game known as American football.
I really appreciate you having me on tonight. Have a great night, Scott.
Yeah, you too, man. And for everybody else out there, of course, want to remind you that we will be back on the radio, on CBS Sports Radio this Sunday from 8 to 10 a.m., and we will be joined by our special guest, Alec Ingold. So make sure you listen to that. He's going to stay with us for 2 segments, so we'll have him for the better part of a half hour. He was supposed to be in studio with us here in Las Vegas. Apparently, he's going to be in town in Las Vegas, but because of all of this coronavirus stuff, unfortunately, we cannot bring guests into the studio any longer. So until this passes by, which I'm sure you can all understand as you're going through everything that we're going through. So make sure you tune in to that. We'll also have Vinny Bonsignor from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He's been breaking stories, broke a lot of the free agent stories the last couple days as he covers the beat for the Raiders. Like Vinny a lot, and he's a frequent guest on the show. So he'll be on and answer questions about where the Raiders are, what they did, who they might have been in on but didn't end up getting. So we'll get the whole lowdown from Vinny, as well as, again, talking to Alec Ingold. That's on CBS Sports Radio 1140 here in Las Vegas. If you're outside Las Vegas, like a lot of you are, and as Cory continues to give me crap about telling you that the Raiders will make the playoffs, love you, Cory. We will. You can listen to the show, the radio.com app. It's free on your Android phone or your iOS phone. You can also listen to it on your laptop on the website. So make sure you do that. We also stream every week here on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. Of course, as you guys know, the best feed is here on YouTube. So join us as we do that every Sunday with Kelly Kreiner and Chaz Osborne, who are my co-hosts. For everybody here at Silver and Black today, we appreciate you being with us. Don't forget, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit notifications, that bell, and hit all so you don't miss any more of our videos. We really would appreciate that. We will talk to everybody on Sunday. Until then, make sure you guys take care of one another. Make sure you do things like wash your hands, folks, and don't hoard food. And if you have anybody elderly in your neighborhood, in your family, someone you know, make sure they're okay. Call them, make sure they have groceries, help them out because they're at most risk with this thing, and we want to make sure they stay safe. Until Sunday, may the autumn wind always be at your back. We'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for joining us here on Silver and Black today.